Welcome to Restore the Glory podcast. I'm Jake Kemp.
And I'm Bob Schutz.
We're two Catholic ministry leaders and former psychotherapists talking about healing, restoration, and everything we've learned in our personal and professional lives.
And integrating our Catholic faith into everything that we do.
All right, Bob, let's get into it. Welcome back, listeners. Bob, we're in a series, and this is the last part of our series for men, about men, etc. And we have one more good friend, dear guest, who's with us. So, Bob, who do we have with us today?
Yeah, it's a joy to introduce Paul George, who many people know from his work around the country, a host for the Steubenville conferences for years. I've met him and Gretchen probably 25 years ago or so. And so he was still a young man. I was about his age now, right?
Yeah, probably.
Just been a good friend, and he was on our board for a while at John Paul II Healing Center, and then he got off the board so he could do men's ministry with John Edwards, who was one of our earlier guests. And so, yeah, just delight to have you, Paul.
Yeah, it's great to be with you guys, honestly. Good to see you, Jake, Bob. Yeah.
And Paul, we have been acquaintances, I guess, for a lot of years of always hearing about each other. You know, I'm in Denver, I think, and, you know, connections with the Ben Singers and just all kinds of, so it's an honor to be with you. And it's been cool. I feel a kindred brotherly spirit with you, like another brother out there who's spent and devoted his whole life and marriage to full-time ministry. You know, it's as sometimes it can seem glorious, but then you learn about the real day-to-day life of it. And I remember years ago, you came to Vancouver to do an event. It was great to connect with you there. And here we are again, still plugging away at it. So in some ways, just thank you for your faithfulness and continuing to walk the narrow way. I know it's not easy, but it's fruitful. So glad you're with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, it really is. I mean, and, you know, I know the whole podcast isn't on video, but I get to see you guys' faces, which is good. So I feel connected. You know, I'm down here in Louisiana. It's a great community. But like for you guys who have been in the trenches of ministry for decades, there's not many of us, you know, in a sense that you feel a kindred spirit, a spiritual brotherhood and connection, even though we may not stay in touch. It's like, man, I need to pray for the Kims today, or Dr. Bob and their ministry. You know, we're in this, you know, we're still doing this. Like, how is this possible? You know, like,
isn't that?
Yeah.
You said it well. We're still doing this? Like, you put all the tones of to what? And, we're still doing this. This is great. Yeah. So, Paul, one of the things that we like to just hear, I think it just helps our listeners get to know you, is, you know, your story. And that's such a big, broad dynamic. And so bring us into you know, your life, your story, wherever and however you feel led to go.
Yeah. I mean, I can give you the broad strokes and you guys can certainly pick me apart for sure. You guys are good at that. It's a good gift you have. I know that about Bob. I've been praying with him since I was in college, I think, and started this healing journey and learning inner healing prayer and whatnot. And thank God God peels us back in layers, because I would probably exploded, you know, like with, you know, healing back then. So God's been very patient with me, but kind of broad stroke, I grew up in a very small town. My parents married young and started having marital problems when I was maybe around 3 or 4 years old. You know, it was tumultuous. You know, they did their best. But when I was around 8 years old, they divorced. My parents split. My mom moved with her and my sister. And the reason I share that is just because it's part of my healing story. It's part of what I brought into my own marriage and my own parenthood. You know, honestly, it's, you know, nature and nurture together have kind of made me, you know, who I am. And so my parents didn't stop going to church. Like, so the faith part, I was baptized, and then, you know, my parents didn't go to church much once they divorced and fell away. So church wasn't really a part of my funny story. And I actually share this at the men's conferences, is that my mom made me get confirmed in 8th grade, and I'm glad she did, but we didn't go to church. Like, she didn't either. Like, it wasn't part of our, and I got kicked out of confirmation class.
Okay, that's a story that needs to be shared.
Yeah, my mom asked, she's like, why? I was like, because I wanted to. Like, that is exactly why. Like, it wasn't unintentional, maybe subconscious, but for sure, my behavior was very subconscious. Like, I didn't know why I did what I did, right? Like, when you're young and not self-aware. So, long story short, the reason, the way I met Bishop Sam Jacobs, who's had a major impact on my life, Bob's life, the ministry. I know, Jake, you've interfaced with Bishop Sam as well, is when I was 14 years old, the teacher said the only way I can get back into class was to write a letter to the bishop. So I didn't know even what a bishop was. I didn't even know my local priest, much less a bishop. So at 14, I wrote a letter. There was no email or anything back then. So I stamped it, licked it, mailed it. And he called me. He called my house like 2 weeks later, asked to speak to me, and told me I needed to come to his office and meet with him.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and I don't even know why I'm on this story, just because it's really hysterical.
It's good. Yeah.
But probably pivotal as well. So my mom just dropped me off. Like, I was shirt untucked, hair disheveled, just 14 years old, like the most undeveloped frontal lobe that you could imagine. And just went into his office, and he leaned across his desk, and he just looked at me and didn't know me. He said, I just need you to know that Jesus loves you. And I mean, up to that point, any authority figure, in a sense, outside of my dad, I was always in trouble with, at school, or, a coach or whatever. I was always paddled. I mean, so many times, so I thought that, like, literally he was going to whip out a paddle. Like, well, all right, let's get to it, man. Take my licks.
Yeah.
And he just looked at me and said, Jesus loves you. I just need you to know that. And if you show up for confirmation, I'll confirm you. So I was like, man, this is like get out of jail free card, pass go and collect $200.
Yeah.
So I did, and he did confirm me, and I really kind of believe in a lot of ways that was like the beginning of my conversion. Although the grace was there, it didn't really kind of, connect till 3 or 4 years later when I was in high school, and I had an encounter with Jesus at a retreat that I got invited to from some friends of mine. That conversion was just the real beginning. I always say the grace of my confirmation was unleashed there. And so I began this journey as a young adult, sort of just trying to figure out life and Christianity and Catholicism. And it was probably in college where I began to become more self-aware of my behavior, in a sense of like, why do I do the things I do? Or why am I emotionally fearful or detached from certain decisions or things? And particularly, like, if you would just take relationships in general with females, right? Like, I had a desire to get married, but a real deep fear of what that might look like in my life. And I became very aware of that. Like, there was a definite like awareness of like, yeah, there's a blockade there. I don't know why. I'm sure it's connected to my upbringing, but I can't figure it out. So a series of events happened. One is I went to a secular counselor, just checked myself in. I called my mom and said, do you know anybody? And interestingly enough, Jake, his name was Jake, and he's passed away now. But I just walked in his office and said, I just need to unpack some things. And he was like, all right. And just kind of started talking through just normal life upbringing and connecting the dots. And he was just really good about helping me connect a few dots to kind of get me going a little bit. And in that season of life, I think I met Bob down in Florida at like a young adult or youth conference event or something. I don't know, Bob, was it Beach Blast or, I don't know what.
It was Beach Blast.
Yeah, Beach Blast.
That's a throwback. Wow, with Martha Gano and all that.
Yeah, the Gano crew for sure. And started to have like a deeper conversion of the Holy Spirit and learning to pray more and pray with sort of the internal struggles I was having. I always say, like, probably more so my own path was less of like external, like vices, more like internal bondage and behavior, emotional, unhealed wounds, as you guys talk about a lot. So started to really kind of unpack those and it got me to a place where I think I was willing to date, and I met Gretchen, and we got married in 1997. So it's been a 29-year healing journey with her for sure. And marriage has been a huge catalyst for continued healing in my life, as it's meant to do, to be a vocation, a sacrament of healing. And yeah, so that healing journey's continued. I always say my conversion has been lifelong, and it's been ongoing. And the Lord's been very generous and patient with me as I've pulled back those layers and gone through just a more authentic version of who God created me to be. So that's sort of the broad stroke of where we're at. We have 5 kids, 1 grandbaby now. My oldest daughter's married and has a baby. So we're in multiple seasons of life, young adult kids, married kid, and we still have 1 at home. So
That's beautiful. Bob, why don't you go first? There's all kinds of...
Yeah, why don't you pick up on your relationship with Bishop Sam Jacobs as a second father to you and the influence of that? Because I think that's been a big part of your formation.
yeah, I think one of the things that the reason I wasn't afraid of Bishop Sam is because I had a good relationship with my dad, in a sense of my dad and I always had a friendship. He did not necessarily spiritually lead, and his own story has helped me kind of really understand. But Bishop Sam really, he did fill a gap in my life as a mentor and a spiritual father. So from that confirmation, he was like a chaplain of our football team in high school. He would show up on the sidelines, and I reconnected with him and stayed in touch with him all through high school and college. And I would call him and just say, can I meet with you? And he would say, absolutely. And pretty much became my spiritual director unofficially. And so when Gretchen and I were discerning marriage, we met them together. And I was like, look, you know me better than anybody. You think I should or could or can survive this, like you need to tell me, do not do this. And no, so he married us, he baptized our kids, and has been just a tremendous spiritual father in my life and a lot of people's lives for sure.
Just one other aspect of your life that, just for the listeners to hear, is your involvement with sports through college and then working as a chaplain for the saints and stuff like that. And that was really the beginning of your ministry, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, working with men and through sports has always been kind of part of my passion, but it hasn't always happened the way that I thought it would. Maybe I was going to be a college coach or something like that. I played baseball through college, but the Lord's just kind of taken me a different route, in a sense. So I think it was like 2000, maybe 7 or 8, we were living in a home in Thibodeau where Bishop Sam was the bishop at the time. He's retired now. And I met one of the New Orleans Saints football players' wives at a conference I was speaking at. And she said, look, we're Catholic. We live in New Orleans 6 months out of the year. I'd love for you to meet my husband. And would you be willing to do some things for the team, particularly the Catholic guys? And so I had a cool opportunity to go to training camp and, do some Bible studies with the guys and build some relationships. Just kind of, I always say, like, God has blessed my desire to do things like that, but that's not been my full-time ministry, but yeah, certainly a blessing.
I'm curious, Paul, just several things that you're saying make me want to ask this question. Can you see the wisdom in that and the Lord not letting that become the major thing? And if so, what did you realize was the wisdom in that not being your path? Because I think a lot of men can go, man, why not this? This just makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. How would you respond to that?
No, that's true. And I do think a lot of men, and speak to them and ask the question, we live a lot in regret in the past. What if I would have married someone different or done something different or had a different job or a career? And the enemy is so good at just pulling us into the past. Just look behind you, look into the past. And it's a trap. It's a major trap, And I'm not talking about looking at the past to get insight and understanding so that you can move forward. Like, let me look into my family, my origin, all those things. That's not what I'm talking about. It's just this bondage of the past, of what ifs and regrets and past behavior and sin. Men live there, like, a lot. And so did I. Why didn't I do that? Why didn't I do this? But I've always just given that desire to the Lord and just said, Lord, like, you take it. And at the end of the day, you have to surrender to it and become at a place where you're comfortable with who you are, who God created you to be, and the gifts that God has given you and the things that He puts in front of you to do. I'll give you a funny example, which was unexpected. Maybe about 20 years ago or more, it all blends together. I got asked to speak at a youth conference in Houston. We weren't living in Louisiana at the time, so I flew in. So it's a big youth conference. And they're like, well, the youth conference is held in this massive ballroom that's connected to Minute Maid Park at the time, which is the Houston Astros stadium. I was like, oh, that's cool. So you're going to give this many talks. And you guys know, like, you just go, okay, I'll give this many talks. So I get there and I'm just like, all right, I'm here. This is great. So the organizer comes up to me and says, hey, just one request, kind of favor. Like, so the main keynote speaker, we asked if they could throw out the first pitch at the Houston Astros game. Right?
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
And I was like the real game? And,
yeah.
and she was like, yeah, you're going to, if you're okay with it. And, whose little kid's dream is not to, like, play in the major leagues.
Yeah.
And Gretchen just happened to be in town with me for that event. And sure enough, like, full stadium.
Wow.
There I am, just some, like, Catholic youth speaker guy. Like, no one knew who I was. Like, they put my face on the Jumbotron. Not a person in there knew who I was.
That's awesome.
And I when I got on the mound, I just felt like the Lord was just like, I'll take care of this desire in you. Like, it's just a little, affirmation. So I was like, don't bounce the pitch, Paul.
Yeah, I was like, did you, like, look for a sign? You're, like, waving off signs?
Yeah. So, but little things like that. But, at the same time, my path hasn't been always my passion. I've had to come to grips with, like, God's plan for my life is way better than what I'm passionate about at times. Because I think as men, like, we often can just become passionate about things overnight. Oh, all of a sudden I want to fix vehicles. Like, I want to collect old collectibles. And what if I could do that for a living? Like, men are just constantly, our minds. And so it's staying focused on what the Lord wants for us and what He places in front of us to do as His son.
How do you, just a follow up there, what are some ways that you've learned about how to notice that it's Him in the course of life? Because I think a lot of men can struggle with that. We can get in our heads, start doubting and, dissecting and whatever. But what are some of the ways you've learned that, oh man, I know that that's Him?
Yeah. I would say this is probably, Jake, has been the hardest part for me in my journey, is trusting that God would provide what's best for me. I think connected to my own self-sufficiency, my own brokenness, this deep-rooted wound that I've dealt with of, I got to do it myself or figure it out myself. I got to open the door or kick it open, or having to sit back and trust that God is going to provide, will, and does, has certainly 100% been a very difficult and healing journey for me. I feel like I'm finally at a place where I believe that when I say it, but I've always struggled with it. I've always struggled with, will God provide, or do I need to do something immediately?
So my final question, Bob, sorry, I've got all kinds of things I want to ask. When you say that, Paul, it makes my mind, and whether this is the therapist in me or just curiosity or trying to, make sense of other people's story, because it helps me make sense of my own. One of the first things that you commented on was your parents divorced when you were young. Like, do you think that impacted your just general trust capacity to trust people? Or am I connecting dots? And I guess in some ways I'm wanting to explore how did being the child of parents who divorced affect you? Because I know this is a really common story for men out there.
Yeah, it is. Everyone's situation is different in how that unfolds in the home, right? And then how it's perceived, how old you are when it happens, what kind of survival mechanisms and behaviors you develop through the process of, dysfunction in the home. I'll tell just the end of the story. I have a great relationship with my parents, my mom and dad, and that has been through a lot of just hard work, like just intentional hard work. So I'm very, very excited about that. I would think I don't know if it was lack of trust, but I think internally, subconsciously, from a very young age, because of the dysfunction in our home or the divorce or the fighting or, the split, no matter what happens in a divorce, people get hurt. It's just part and parcel that comes with it. And they experience wounds. My parents did too. I would say one of the behaviors that I developed was subconsciously, I had this ability to take care of myself. I didn't need anyone to take care of me. And that could be from 4 years old, like waking up in the morning, fixing myself breakfast, getting dressed, making my bed. My parents would have gone to work. Maybe my dad wasn't living in the home at the time because of separation. Just God created us to survive. Like we have this unique ability to develop survival mechanisms, mentally, emotionally. So I would say I was very unaware of how much this was ingrained into my DNA. I can do it myself. I can handle it, even to the point where one conversation that happened over the course of probably the first 7 to 10 years of my marriage, Gretchen would say, I feel like she's really good at feeling words, which I've learned is very important. She said, I feel like you don't need me. I feel like you don't need me. And I had no idea what that even meant. Like, how is that perceived? Like, how am I putting off an aura that, and I would say back, and it's sort of embarrassing, but I think it's important for me to say it because we share this a little bit in our own stories. I would say, I love you very much, but I don't actually need you.
How'd that go over?
Not well. Not well.
Yeah.
Not well at all. But I was very I felt like what I was saying was real, like true. Like
Yeah.
I can fix my own food, wash my own clothes, take care of myself. I thought I was doing her a favor by saying, I don't need you to take care of me, but I love you and you love me. And, we can coexist in that. And little did I know that was just another wall that was put up of, so I would say I operated a lot just subconsciously, even out of that self-sufficiency, whatever word you want to kind of name it. Yeah.
We are so much alike in that, Paul. As I had that exact conversation with Margie early in marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And it was same thing. Growing up, parents are divorced. My mom had to raise 7 kids. I can iron. I can take care of everything. And I saw her neediness, which was a real turnoff to me. My mom's neediness. It was like, that's a bad thing to need. And so if I'm going to love, I just have to love without any needs. So when I told that to Margie, I saw the hurt in her eyes. It was like, why are you hurt? I'm giving you a gift here, So I get that from the inside.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Gretchen's probably one of the things that she came into marriage with, and she came from a good family, but was this sort of wound or vow that she didn't want to be a nag. She didn't want to be the one who was like, constantly asking for things or more. Like so she didn't say much. And I was like, I needed her to kind of tell me how she was really feeling. I needed her,
You needed
to
something.
have that breakthrough. Yeah. Like what? Like, I'm very confused, because it wasn't like I did not want to figure it out. I think part of the healing journey begins with being self-aware, like self-aware of my behavior, whether that behavior is good, bad, or ugly. I'm becoming self-aware of where it's rooted, grounded, and I want to work through that. I want to change that behavior. I think a lot of men, when they get to adulthood, they are self-aware, but they just may not think it's possible to change behavior. So they develop this vow of I'll always be this way, always live this way, always think this way. And I didn't want that. I didn't want that in my marriage, or I didn't want to always feel like but I didn't know how to have that breakthrough. And it might have been in a conversation with you, Bob. I might have called you, probably Bishop Sam, and just said, let me process this wall that Gretchen and I are hitting around what I'm saying. Help me understand, So, I remember the first time I went back to her after praying through that and literally telling her, I actually need you to love me in places that I didn't think I could be loved. And I broke down. Probably the first time in our marriage, 10 years in our marriage, she probably saw me cry, which is wild, right? And I needed her to understand and love this broken person that I had yet to reveal to her. This broken little boy, this wounded person that I thought, well, if I protect her from that person, then I'm doing her a favor, as Bob said. I'm helping her out, because trust me, she doesn't want to love that guy. That's hard to do. I thought, protecting her would be good.
And she has loved you well there.
100%. Yes. I mean, I would say people don't think that the sacrament of marriage is a healing sacrament. They're certainly wrong. I mean, it is 100% a sacrament of healing as part of the grace that comes with that. And if all of us who are married, particularly men who are listening to this, can understand that, then it's such a gift. It's such a gift to our own journey to become fully who God created us to be.
I was saying this, Heather and I just started mentoring a engaged couple. And one of the things that I felt prompted to say to them is, why are you actually getting married? And versus what's the point of it? And if those don't align, it's going to be an interesting ride, and man, I don't think I would have ever had the capacity to answer that question myself when I was their age. Yet I think it's the right question. And so, we can say the right answer, I want to be a saint, or that's why I'm married, because I want them to go to heaven. And, great. That's true. Right answer. But when it actually gets to the going to the heaven part and the getting the stuff out of the way, that's in the way of heaven part, it's like, whoa. So it's cool. We all know that in our own marriages and stories. But Paul, I really appreciate the just simple grounding reality of becoming self-aware is a really nice first domain to grow in. And a phrase that I started saying was, we all actually make sense. When you start to understand who you are and what your story's been, almost everybody makes a lot of sense about why they are the way they are and what they struggle with and why they're doing what they're doing. When you understand people, and then you understand what happened to this unique individual, you go, oh man, you make so much sense about why this is happening. But when you don't understand people in general or your own story, it can feel so stinking confusing and difficult and maddening. And I mean, it's cool because I'm hearing, a couple of things that I just noted here is, two people came into your life that you highlighted. I'm sure there were more. And you said you went to that therapist and your words were, I just wanted to connect some dots, which is exactly a journey of self-awareness. Like, help me understand what the heck is going on in me and in my story. And the same with Bishop Sam. Paul, would you agree? Like, what would you say about just the value and the starting point of self-awareness in the journey of healing or improving your marriage or being a good man?
Yeah, I think, men are simple. I mean, we're all complicated and simple at the same time, but you're right, Jake, just understanding ourselves. I tell guys all the time, you don't have to overcomplicate it. You're probably already pretty self-aware of your behavior.
That's good.
Why do I get angry? I know I'm an angry person, or my family's never even seen me cry. I don't tell them, men they're very self-aware of their behavior, but you have to be intentional about connecting the dots. Like, why do I do that behavior? I'm doing a little bit of writing, but I was writing this story in a book I'm working on right now. And I remember as a kid, we would call it the George anger. So my grandfather was angry and he would just go off on a cuff, and he raised horses and just, he would just like, and then my dad would say, well, I got the George anger too, and he would throw a wrench when he was working on something. And then I was told, well, I have George anger. So I just thought like, well, of course, I was born with it. I was born with like, it's part of my DNA,
Yeah.
like it's not like a learned behavior. It was just injected at creation, and I'm kind of laughing at this because the reality is like, I just told myself, well, I'll just always be this way because it just is who I am. But then like you have maybe a spout of anger and you hurt someone. You're like, I don't want to do that. Like that doesn't make sense to me. Help me connect the dots of where this is. And we could lay out all of our sort of behaviors or places we're stuck. We're very self-aware of those. And I think for men, it's beginning the process of that self-awareness of connecting the dots, like taking maybe the hard journey of connecting those dots on where did this come from? Where is it rooted in? Where was I wounded? Where did this begin? Because I think one of the saddest things men tell me often, and I've had the thought myself, is I'll always be this way. I've resided to always be this way in my life.
It's funny, Paul, because as I'm hearing you talk, I'm hearing you describe what in, our worlds we call the anatomy of a wound. And I think that, when you go from self-awareness, often I found in working with men, it's like, then, okay, well, what am I looking for? Like, what species am I hunting here? I don't even know what I'm looking for. How do I detect it? There's a skill involved I think that's a really, keen insight of men know what they're doing. Like, I'm angry, I'm disconnected, but the understanding of the why, let alone admitting it, how do I change it? Man, that's where it can get pretty confusing or overwhelming quickly. But, for me, the anatomy of a wound is this very simple concept that I find really helpful and can be a great gift to men in general. So just quick review about what the anatomy of a wound is. Like, I have experiences that happened, and because I'm human, and this is how human beings work, based upon those experiences, I will begin to believe things about myself and other people. The beliefs about myself that are not true are called identity lies. The beliefs about other people that aren't true are called judgments. And so if I start walking around believing I'm bad, I'm unlovable, or no one is worthy of trust, all people will hurt me, I'm not safe, other people are dangerous, then I'm going to now go into the third category. So experiences, then beliefs, meaning judgments, identity lies. And then the third category you mentioned earlier, Paul, was vows. Like, so now I'm going to do things in response to the first two to either protect myself or make sure I get what I need. So, we talk about self-sufficiency. That's a great example of a vow. Life happened. My belief is no one will take care of me. Therefore, I have to take care of myself. There's the vow. So even that, being able to label the three categories is super helpful. And then you can start doing something about those things. And I think if I had to stick the landing here with regard to men, I would say that for me, most men struggle in the domain of, okay, I'm aware of what I believe. What now? Like, I don't know what to do with this. And then when you suggest, bring it to the Lord, they're like, come on. Like, really? That's what? Or renounce it. Like, what? And it's like faith. The bottom drops out of faith right in that moment because, ironically, approaching a relationship when you've been wounded in relationship isn't automatic or isn't necessarily easy. It requires some get up and go. It's like, I don't want to go work out, but I'm glad I did after the fact. It's usually that approach that's required in those domains. So I don't know, like what comes up for you guys as I say, does that resonate?
Yeah, definitely for me. I think it is the moving forward. Like I'm self-aware, I'm connecting to God's, what do I do? Like, how do I move forward with this? There's two things there's a lot of things I found very helpful, but developing a prayer life, like a contemplative life of prayer where I can have this conversation with the Lord. Okay. And I know like men are thinking, well, how do you do that? Well, just like you would have a conversation with, if I walked into your office or Bob's office and you guys were my therapist, I would just say, here's what's going on, guys. Like, help me connect the dots. I want to have that conversation with Jesus. But the other thing I would say is that, particularly in our wounds, because we feel like that they could be hidden or dark, and we got to hold them to ourselves. I think it's extremely important to allow someone that you trust into that conversation to help you navigate ahead. So asking a trusted therapist or a friend or a counselor, a mentor, here's what I'm unpacking. Like, I want to bring this into the light. Like, I want to, this vow, this behavior, this wound. And I would say for me, like, if I'm going to be on this journey through the lenses of my vocation of marriage, Gretchen's understanding of my wounds has been extremely important for me living authentically, transparent, and journeying ahead. Like, her having understanding of my behavior is very important. I have a lot of men say, I'm going to work on this on the side and then change and then go back to my wife. And I'm like, no, your wife should probably know what you're doing right now, like what you're unpacking. Like, she's not your counselor, no, but like, you need to let her in,
Yeah.
to this.
Yeah. And as you talked about that turning point around 10 years into your relationship, you went from the fear of that and you kind of jumped in that moment when you were able to be emotional and everything. But talk about that fear of opening it up and what's going to happen if I share these things.
Yeah. I think for me, I came to a breaking point. Like, how much can you bottle up emotionally before you explode, And for me, I never had like bits of anger. I just went internal. Like, I just shut down emotionally inside, And Gretchen could perceive that. She wanted more. She wanted to know me more. And I didn't know what that meant or looked like. But you know what men are? They're brave. And if you asked a guy next to you, said, let's jump off this cliff together, there's a battle down there, your guy would say, okay, let's do it, So I know that about men. God's given us courage and bravery. And so if you look at your spiritual life or your emotional life, God's given you more courage to deal with that than he would a stranger with a gun at the door. Like, I'm just telling you, like, so for me, like, I had this image. So when my parents divorced, my mom drove off in a U-Haul truck, packed the house while I was at school. And that was an image I had prayed with a lot through healing, like, where were you, Jesus, that day when I was 8? And just massive amount of healing around that memory and that day. But Gretchen and I, about 10 years, give or take, we had gotten in a little argument in the kitchen. I wasn't shouting or anything. It was a misunderstanding and we've always resolved to talk things out, like, let's not leave angry unless it's like midnight, like, let's talk about this in the morning. But I had to bring one of my little kids to like soccer practice. So she's like, you got to go, but we left like in a frenzy, it was not resolved. And we were both tired. I was on a long stretch of travel and it was just a lot going on in both of our lives emotionally. And I remember leaving the house, bringing my child to soccer practice. And when I was driving back, the memory re-popped up in my head, and it popped up like it was like clear as day. When I get to my house, Gretchen's going to be gone. She's going to have packed and left.
Oh, wow.
Which to her would have been the most foreign thing in the world. Like, that has never crossed her mind. But she doesn't have the same wound that I do. And I remember driving home just expecting her to be gone. And I just told myself, I said, if she's not gone, if she's still there, if she's willing to stay, I'm going to jump off the cliff and share everything with her. Like, either she's going to love me and I'm going to just tell her everything, or she's going to leave me, but I can't live this way. And when I'm talking about like leave, like I didn't have, like my deep, dark secrets were just like things that I was uncovering in my own brokenness and wounds, my behaviors, my, things that God was revealing to me as memories that were popping up in my prayer time of like, this happened when I was 4. This was when I was 6. This was when I was 8. This is when I was 10. It's like, what? Had no idea. Like God, when I prayed for the grace to connect the dots emotionally to my wounds and vows, God was very generous with those things and like walking me through that, Probably during that time I was calling Bob and talking through some things and meeting with the bishop as well. But I needed to bring Gretchen into that place for our marriage to launch and move forward.
Man, I really appreciate that is such a clear depiction of what I would say in my own marriage and in so many marriages I've worked with and just known about, where my experience and my story becomes the lens through which I see everything and everyone, and I start acting based upon my expectation of what has happened to me. Like, it makes so much sense in light of your story, Paul. That actually happened to you.
Yeah.
Big fight, most important woman in your life leaves. So of course you go, your central nervous system, your soul, everything just goes, oh, I know what happens here. Relational disruption, most important woman in my life will leave. That's how the story goes. That's what I know. And without that awareness, then you start relating to, you could have, gone down a path where you related to Gretchen as if she was your mom. And, that's not necessarily odd. That might sound odd, like, what? Nobody does that. And it's like, no, actually, that is what happens. That's how human beings work. You bypassing that is more difficult than it not happening. It's more common that it happens than it doesn't. But if you can be aware that that dynamic is happening and then start to press in, like what I love about the kind of second part of that story is that you in some ways, truth and life were coming into you because you were realizing she's not my mom. That was the unspoken words. If Gretchen's still here, that means she's not my mom. And therefore, the lie that she is my mom is false and not true. So I can engage with her in a different way. And that's such a beautiful little scene there that's healing. And I would argue that's normative in the life of a disciple of Jesus. That is this is not some, I gotta go to Bob Schutz, or I gotta, that's normal in the life of a disciple. When we're understanding and having the courage to jump off the cliff of our own heart into the dark places of our story, trusting that he jumps with us into those spaces, we have nothing to fear. It doesn't mean it's going to be a smooth ride. I think there's the false expectation everybody assumes. Well, Jesus is with me. Why aren't we driving in a Bentley through this stuff? That's not his way. But you can be sure that there's life and transformation available. And what I love about it, Paul, is there's healing. In a nutshell, there's a little moment of healing, of truth replacing lie. Then you re-engage. So the vow of maybe I have to protect myself, that vow's broken because you're re-engaging with intentionality. There you go. That's a little picture of healing. It's beautiful. It's a cool example.
Just really a great illustration of the journey of the inward awareness and then the healing and how that impacts you, your relationship, and then impacts the family. And it's just the generational things are broken there because what happened in your family and what you suffered, and you live in the fear of that, and then you step into it in the way that you do. Now, all of a sudden, you and Gretchen create a safety, a stability for your children. And so how important it is. And, you were talking before about awareness. And, Jake, you were mentioning that too, about what are we aware of and what are we not aware of. We're also not aware of how much our behavior, even when we're not actively acting out, how much our behavior hurts the people around us. We may see it, we may hear about it, but we're not aware of that. And so just that walking into, okay, this is how it's affecting. I don't want to keep doing this because this is affecting my relationship with Gretchen. This is affecting how she's experiencing being loved. This is affecting my children when we're living in this tension.
Yeah, and one of the things I've obviously learned is it's not my wife or my kids' responsibility for my healing. It's mine.
That's good.
And there were times where it's like, well, Gretchen, why don't you just tell the kids I'm stressed? That's why I'm on the edge. Like, they need to get it,
Yeah.
And I look back, it was like, that was like the most wrong thing posture. I'm putting my behavior and my stress on them. They should understand me better. And they're not at the age or the capacity, and nor is it her responsibility for everyone to tiptoe and navigate around dad's tired and works hard. Like my freedom and joy is my responsibility. And I think men need to understand that. And God gives us the grace and courage for that journey and to take the leap. But I will say this, there have been a lot of conversations we've had with married couples, particularly the woman, is maybe like, well, what do I do? Whereas a woman, like, when in her own woundedness, or like maybe she hasn't been loved well, or, told that in the marriage, that they become at times very accusative. If you would just grow up and be better husband and man up. And I mean, I've heard some of the worst words come out. And what it does is it wounds the man even more.
Yeah.
Because he's already feeling extremely inadequate in his behavior and his fatherhood and his, role as a husband. And it pushes him away even further. Instead of obviously praying, but trying to authentically love that broken person into a place where they can receive healing and get on that journey. God uses the other spouse to help in that process, but it's not their responsibility.
Yeah. When you were just saying that a moment ago, it reminded me when you were describing, hey, why don't you tell the kids that I'm on edge? What that made me think of was like the lots of times I've done something similar, and how I began to understand that is, oh wow, I'm relating to my children as an equal, which means I'm being like a child.
Yeah, that's good.
And so I'm like, oh, hang on. Right, I'm supposed to be the adult. But I think the deeper cut in that is I'm actually relating to them like an orphan. I'm looking around our home, and it's almost I'm experiencing it as an orphanage. And what an orphanage means is there's no mom or dad in the place. And so the young broken places in me enter into scenes and scenarios in life as if there are no mom and dad in the story. I'm alone. No one will take care of anybody. So my kids become orphans with me in the quote unquote orphanage. And the desperate need is for a loving mother and father to enter the scene. That's exactly what healing is doing at a primary level. And then when that occurs, then all of a sudden my insecurities calm down, my fears calm down, and I'm matured into being my actual age that can physiologically have children. And maybe my emotional age starts to match that physiological age. And like, oh, okay, cool. My kids aren't a threat anymore because I don't feel their same age with the pressure to make everything work out. I mean, the basic rule of thumb is kids shouldn't ever get married because it's just too friggin' hard. And we would all be like, that's ridiculous to look at 2 8-year-olds and go, I think they're ready for marriage. Be like, what is wrong with you? But sometimes emotionally we operate like that. And when those dynamics come up, Paul, I loved what you said. Often that can activate the spouse's dynamics where, maybe they had a similar experience in their upbringing and they're looking at their husband and they're being reminded of their own story. And then the young parts of them come up. And for Heather and I, this was pivotal, was me being able to distinguish the grown woman who I married and the wounded girl who's still there, and vice versa. So being able to see it in myself, the wounded boy and the man, and seeing in Heather, the wounded girl, Because then all of a sudden I was like, oh man, she's operating out of that young girl place. This isn't a cruel wife. This is a scared girl coping. And man, if I can keep my wits about me, I can love her really well there. And it just goes 100 times better in those scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, that's been pivotal for us to learn to love the broken person inside the other. Like if you don't get to that place in your marriage, I think there's a level of real vulnerability and joy that you've yet to experience. And so you see people when they're married, 25, 30, 40 years, just say, I don't really want to do this anymore. And you're like, what? Like you've already 40 years in, like,
Yeah.
Because there's been an emotional drift apart, there's been a connection that hasn't happened on the deepest soul level, I want to circle back to one thing that's been extremely important, because a lot of times one of the things that I could say or men would say was, well, I've changed, so let's just move on.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's extremely important. One is that the effect of your behavior in the past, you have to give the other people in your home permission to heal on their own from your behavior. Well, dad has always acted this way. Now he's different. And so the fact that they're bracing themselves is because of you. And you can't just expect everyone to be like, oh, dad's changed. He no longer drinks, or he no longer does this. And we have to allow people to heal on their own from our behavior. And two, what's been extremely helpful for us, for me, particularly, and Gretchen, in breaking those vows and starting a new journey, is for me to acknowledge what I've done. Like to go back and say, you remember the times where I would say to you, I didn't need you. My intentional wasn't to hurt your feelings, but I know that I did. Like, I know that hurt you, and I want to apologize for that. Like, I want to ask forgiveness for that and to talk through it. And it's been extremely helpful to go through that healing conversation together on hurts, so that now I can expect that our behavior moving forward is going to be different. Yes, but I can't just not acknowledge what I did at the same time.
Man, that's so good.
Yeah, so much wisdom there. You and Gretchen, as I've known you over the years, just both have entered into your own healing journey. And so when you come together that way, there's a mutual respect and understanding. And because you've shared it along the way, there's a sensitivity now. Like when she brings that up, I know where she's coming from. I have an understanding of that. So I don't have to, if I start to get defensive, oh, okay, that's where she's coming from. I can hear her there, and I can share what's going on inside of me. It's beautiful. You guys have a beautiful marriage in that sense, and not that it's perfect, but it's always growing and open to the Holy Spirit. What happens if it's one or the other is not in that journey? It becomes a lonely process, and still the responsibility for us as men to go on the journey, whether or not our wives are, and the same thing on the part of the wives. It's their responsibility to go on that journey, even if their husbands aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, if we go back to scripture, as hard as it is, Jesus said some very hard things, and scripture does too, for a reason, because it sets us free to be fully who we are. But if you have an unbelieving spouse, or a spouse who isn't on that journey, what does Jesus ask you to do as a Christian, as a Catholic, is to love them as he would love them. Even more than you thought you could, press in with the love of Jesus into the broken person who is turning away or struggling. That's our mission, right? And I've seen marriages transform that way. I've seen the other person break and turn around and come to the Lord because the loving spouse never stopped loving. And there were times that Gretchen was that for me, and vice versa. I could say she would admit that there were times where she would say, I have no idea how you love me through this season or this moment. And yeah, through the grace of Jesus, I'm going to love you no matter what. And that's the healing love. It's not the human love. It's the healing love of Christ through us. And so if you are listening to this and you're one of those spouses, the man or the woman, and that is the hard part, but you will find the most freedom in loving as Christ loved, because that's what you're made to do.
Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, that brings me back exactly to that conversation I was having with the engaged couple is you do that because in the marriage, you realize the point is loving my spouse, not feeling good being loved by my spouse. So it kind of, the Lord is kind, and then there are pockets, I think, in a lot of marriages that it gets really hard. And sometimes those hard seasons last, and it tests. Why are you doing this? What are you all about? Like the adversity in life simply reveals what we believe and where we're immature. And so it's a great grace if our goal is holiness, maturity, and being wonderful lovers. And I'm intentionally using the play on words. Everybody wants to be a stud in the bedroom, but how about the stud outside the bedroom who loves well selflessly when he's getting nothing in return? That is a billion times harder to do. But everybody wants to be that guy when it comes time for the tombstone to be put up. We want to have that on the tombstone, but it's like, oh man, that was actually really, really hard to do. It's like, yeah, like good things usually involve struggle. Paul, I'm curious. If we begin to land the plane, tell us a bit about what your ministry life is and what you do, so people can connect with you in the various domains that you're serving the church.
Sure. We run a ministry called the Art of Living Ministry. Simple. Art of Living comes from a quote from Pope Benedict that said, the evangelization is teaching people the art of living. What does it mean to live as Christ asked us to? So we mostly minister to men and married couples. We work with churches and organizations with their own mission for those things. I help them speak at a bunch of conferences, men's conferences, churches, parishes, do stuff with JP2 Healing Center as well. We do the Redeemed Men's Conference, which has been really, really a blessing, particularly to land on the topic of healing for men and to say this is what the conference is about. So that's been really good. So I'm easy to find. You can just Google Paul George Catholic. It'll probably pop up. But if you do Google Paul George not Catholic, the NBA player, basketball player will pop up.
Yeah.
And good luck.
Yeah,
with that one.
I'm seeing it here, paulgeorge.la.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about your books too, Paul.
Yeah, I have Rethink Happiness, which is my conversion story and finding joy in Christ, and then recent book, Holy Grit, which is the emergence of living a life of faith and masculinity, just for men. That book is just for men. It's been great, and
it's using St. Joseph and John Paul II, all these images of manhood, and then applying it.
Yeah. I have a couple of men's devotionals out there. One is Feast on the Prodigal Son, and one is called Fierce on the journey through the desert as a man. So, yeah, those are out there. I try to do some writing when I can, but yeah, I have a podcast called The Paul George Show. It's randomly out there, but just kind of like you guys, just wake up every day, Lord, what do you want? Let's do it. Let's, I'm just going to do this till I can't anymore.
So good. Paul, it's been a privilege spending this time with you, getting to be with you. And again, thank you for all that you're doing. And, your ministry, awesome, but it's been really a blessing to hear about, how you've journeyed as a man and how you've journeyed in your marriage and in your family. And I just want to bless you and honor you for that most of all. I feel like the public facing stuff can sometimes overshadow some of the deeper, more honest, real hard work of and quote unquote accomplishments of loving well. So yeah, thank you for the example.
Yeah, that's what I appreciate about you, Paul, is how real you've always been as long as I've known you, and just the honesty and vulnerability, and just so easy to love you because you're just you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for your ministry. This podcast has been pretty amazing for men, anybody who listens, but I will encounter people all the time who listen and are like, man, when they said this, it really just kind of unlocked something. So just for both you guys and your willingness to be out there and just helping people on the journey is really great.
Awesome. So listeners, paulgeorge.la, Check out the Paul George Show, his books, Holy Grit, and others. Paul, once again, thanks for being with us. Listeners, we look forward to talking to you again soon. God bless. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you want to go deeper into the journey of healing and restoration, consider partnering with us on Patreon, where you'll gain access to exclusive content just for patrons. Simply go to patreon.com/restoretheglory.